Hello, this is Alan Brooks, and welcome to another New Discovery series teaching. You may ask, what is New Discovery, Alan? What's that all about? Well, I'm gonna tell you. You see, I think outside of the box, more like Jack in a Box, if you know what I mean. But because I wasn't trained in seminaries or by the greatest of Bible schools, I have an edge. I'm too dumb to make a mistake like they do. Now, what mistake do they make? Well, they will focus in on one scripture, one sentence in the past, in the Old Testament, and say, well, that scripture happened in the past. This whole chapter is for the past, so they write it off. But I saw something. I saw that there was a pattern, a sequence of events that led up to the second coming of Christ, and many of these chapters that the experts, the commentaries, God bless their hearts, all said, these happened in the past, so we're writing them off. Just never look at them again. I saw a sequence of events. Now, how did you see that, Alan? Are you special? No, I'm not really. I'm kind of dumb if you want to know the truth, but I'm just dumb enough to be smart, if you know what I mean. Let's put it this way. If you had a book, a Bible, that was predicting World War II for America, there would be a sequence of events for that war. The war would always end with Hiroshima. There would be a big peace after that bomb was dropped in Nagasaki, of course. And a war would always start with an event, which is Pearl Harbor. And there would always be several events in between. It would always last 3.5 years. And there would always be Midway, Okinawa, Iwo Jima, etc., etc., etc. Like that, the Bible has a similar number of events describing the return of Christ. In fact, the experts, God bless their hearts, will say, Jesus Christ is never predicted to come back in the Old Testament. I kind of laughed when I heard that one time. I'm going like, it's all throughout the Old Testament. In fact, most of the prophets are talking about one thing. They are talking about the last 3.5 years of time before Christ comes back, or the Great Tribulation. In Jeremiah 30, verses 6 and 7, this is called the time of Jacob's trouble. And why is it called that? Because it's a time when the northern army will sweep down from Iran and Russia and perhaps Turkey, a Muslim army. They'll sweep through the Middle East, the Shias, and invade the Sunnis of the south. Then they'll come back and act like they're going back home, and they'll invade a peaceful and unsuspecting Israel, as Ezekiel 38:11 says. In fact, if there was a sequence of events about this last period of time, it would be as follows. There's a false peace for Israel. It would last 3.5 years, and it would end with Jesus Christ coming back in the sky with the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. Where do you get that, Alan? Well, it's all that through the Bible, all throughout the Bible, actually. But Jesus gave us a framework. His disciples asked him, Jesus, what are the signs of your coming? And he said there's going to be increased earthquakes, blah, 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 earthquakes, labor pains, and all that stuff, which is all cool. But he said the seminal event, which starts this last 3.5 years of time, will be when the Antichrist and these armies sweep down through the Middle East, and they attack Israel, and Israel living in a false peace. And they'll come into the temple, and they'll stop the sacrifice, the Antichrist will, who leads this army, and he'll proclaim himself God. This event is called the Abomination of Desolation. Why is it called desolation, Ellen? Well, it's because over and over throughout the entire Old Testament, when God comes back, when Jesus Christ comes back, he comes back to a desolated Israel. It says this in Isaiah 54:7. It goes there, Isaiah 54, it talks about the children of the desolate one are more than that of the married woman. Well, why is that? Because Israel will be a defeated, desolate nation. They'll even say, I think it's Isaiah 49, did you even forget about us? Why? Did you forget about us, Lord? Why did you allow this Antichrist army to attack us? We've been so supernaturally protected since 1949. What's happening? What's going on? And Jesus answers them, hey, I can't forget about you. I marked you on the palms of my hands. Now, isn't that poignant? But yes, the Bible has one theme. It talks about this great tribulation, or the time of Jacob's trouble, and it's repeated over and over again. And it's a sequence of events just like for America in World War II. The sequence starts with Israel's invaded. The Antichrist comes into the temple, proclaims himself God. It's called the abomination. That's a code word. This time lasts about 42 months, or 3.5 years, or 1,260 days. Revelation 11:2 says, the Gentiles will trample Jerusalem for that last 42 months. Jesus said this will be the greatest time of tribulation and distress the world has ever seen. So much distress that unless I come back and cut short those days, no life would be spared. Revelation 13 says the Antichrist will rule the world, or the known world at that time, for 3.5 years. And another key word in there is flee. In Revelation 12, it talks about the Antichrist trying to get Israel, but Israel flees to a safe place with the help of 2 wings of a great eagle, which could mean that they'll flee with an airlift with the help of the eagle nation, the United States. Makes sense to me. That's just one possibility. I'm not saying it's doctrine. But anyway, so I found when I studied all these places in the Old Testament that all the experts and commentaries, and if you try to point this out to somebody, the first thing they'll do, it says here in the commentary, you're wrong, Alan. It says here, this happened 2,500 years ago with an Assyrian invasion of blah, blah, blah. And I say, okay, well, I understand that, but how come the rest of this chapter talks about Jesus Christ coming back in the sky and Armageddon and then the millennium? That didn't happen 2,500 years ago, guy. And they walk away, confused look on their face. Well, I don't want to admit that I'm wrong. And I saw the same sequence of events over and over again, like World War II. If you had a book that predicted the end of World War II 40 times, each time it would always be the same. It would always end with Hiroshima. It would always start with Pearl Harbor. No matter what you did, it would always be those 2 bookends. And so likewise, the Bible always has the same sequence of events for the last 3.5 years. It starts with an event, and that event is an invasion of the Middle East, and then finally Israel, and Israel living in a peace, a false peace. Jeremiah 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 8 all say, peace, peace, when there is no peace. Lord, you've deceived the people of Jerusalem with a false peace. God says, well, I'm mad at them because they've gone after other gods. And it says in Ezekiel 38, Israel will be living in a false peace. 38:11. It says, Paul said the same thing. He goes, on the day of the Lord, Israel will be living in peace and safety. And the day of the Lord interrupts that peace and safety because it's a destruction upon Israel. That's 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 3. So you can see there's going to be a time of peace in the future. Some say there's going to be a 7-year peace treaty. Whatever the reason, Israel will be living in a false peace. And it will look like to them at first that this is just an inter-Muslim war, kind of like we've seen many times already. The Shias and the Sunnis, they don't like each other. And in an interesting twist and an interesting confirmation of the truth, the Bible predicted this, 2,500 years ago. It says that Iran is going to be one of the main players, and they're going to want to come down and invade Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and then come back and invade Israel. Well, wouldn't you know it, people? Gee, the Bible's right. Donald Trump, when he was running for president, said something that caused my jaw to drop. He said, Iran wants to invade Saudi Arabia. Wow, I said, that's exactly what Daniel said. Daniel 11, 29 through 45, the kings of the north want to invade the kings of the south. Isaiah 13 through 22, the same pattern of events all throughout the Old Testament. Jeremiah 49 and 50, the king of the north invades the king of the south, Egypt. Then he comes back up and invades Israel in a surprise. Israel's living in a false peace. Isaiah 28:15 says, you've entered into a covenant of death with the realms of the dead. You've entered into a bad covenant, Israel. Don't feel like you're going to be saved from this calamity, because you're not. And then Jeremiah 30 verses 6 and 7 talked about this time of Jacob's trouble, which is this last 3.5 years. So the point of all this is that the Bible has the same sequence of events throughout its pages. And a lot of these involve chapters that the experts say, that happened 2,500 years ago. You're wrong, Alan. But they don't. They didn't happen 2,500 years ago, because in the same chapters it talks about Jesus Christ coming back and Armageddon happening, okay? That's the point of this teaching, is to say that there's a sequence of events. It's the same in the Bible. It's the same throughout the New Testament too. It's always Israel's an invaded nation. There's an abomination. That's a code word. Israel always flees to the mountains. That's another code word. Okay? And then Israel's trampled for 42 months. And then after that tribulation, Jesus said in Matthew 24:29 through 31, after the tribulation, immediately the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. The trumpet sounds, a great sign of the Son of Man appears in the sky. Jesus Christ comes back in some huge sign, a big cross or something. And there's going to be a great trumpet call. And then the angels gather the elect from one end of heaven to the other, from the four corners of the earth. That's an event called the rapture. And, that's after the tribulation. The Bible clearly says that when it happens. If there's another one 7 years before, I'm all there. I'm for that. So don't say I'm not pre-trib, because I'm rooting for it, people. So anyway, the point of all this is that that's the sequence of events that we always see. Israel's invaded during a false peace. Israel's trampled down and desolated. Israel flees. And then it looks like in many of these places in the Old Testament that instantly God comes back at Armageddon. But we know, because we're smart and we read the rest of the scriptures, that no, God doesn't come back instantly after this invasion. God waits 3.5 years, because it says that in many, many places. Jesus said it's the greatest time of distress the world has ever known, spoken of by the prophet Daniel. And Daniel said in Daniel 12:11, it'll be about 3.5 years from the time the sacrifices are stopped by the Antichrist. You see, Israel is going to start sacrificing again in a rebuilt temple that we used to feel that could be and would be on top of the mount where the Dome of the Rock is, the Temple Mount, they say. But now, new archaeological evidence shows it could be rebuilt on the temple in the city of David, what they call it. And so, they've got everything ready. They've got the holy cow, they've got the implements, they've got the garments, they've got everything they need to start the sacrificing again. And wouldn't you know it, that's really interesting, that's exactly what the Bible says the Antichrist will do first? He will stop the sacrificing. And, all throughout this Old Testament, I love Israel, just so you know. I'm for Israel 100%. But all throughout the Old Testament, it says, at the end of time, God says, I'm mad at you, Isaiah 1. I reject your sacrifices and your feasts, your holy days. I hate everything. I don't want all that, people. I want your hearts, God says. And because I reject them, and because you're going after other gods, it says in Isaiah 1, I'm going to send an army of strangers to invade you and to make you like silver and dross, make the dross come to the surface. And I'm going to really hurt you with this invasion, but there's going to be a remnant that comes back. And that's in Isaiah 1, a chapter again that the experts say happened long ago. And it also says in Isaiah 1, afterwards, after all this, Jerusalem will become a righteous and holy and faithful city. Now that didn't happen 2,500 years ago by some invasion of Jerusalem. Hate to tell you, people. And then Isaiah 2 says Jesus Christ comes back and the people hide from him in the caves, just like Revelation 6 says. And then it says the millennium starts. The famous verses about, the weapons of war will be beaten into plowshares. So you can see over 2 chapters, there's the story. Isaiah 1, Israel's invaded, but God's going to bring back a remnant. A remnant is another end-time key code word. Then Isaiah 2, Jesus Christ comes back, the people hide from him, and the millennium starts. Isaiah 3, 4, and 5 talks about elements of that last 3.5 years. There's going to be no rain, one of those verses say in Isaiah 3. Isaiah 5 then says, and that matches, just so you know, the 2 prophets of Revelation 11. They stopped the rain for 3.5 years. You see the segue there? That's what's amazing, is how many times the Old Testament matches the New in the book of Revelation. And so it's not going to rain for the last 3.5 years. And then Isaiah 5 says, Jesus comes back and stands like a banner flag in the sky. And he whistles for his elect, and they come to him. Now, isn't that quite a picture? You probably never heard of that, but that's the rapture, people. And it happens as Jesus Christ comes back. And Isaiah 6 laments about how, Israel will never understand what God is doing until her cities are in ruins. And then we start, that's one sequence of events, Isaiah 1 through 6. I call it a loop. Then Isaiah 7 through 11 is another. Isaiah 7 is a famous scripture about the virgin giving birth to Jesus Christ, Emmanuel. Then Isaiah 7:20 talks about, at the end of time, I'm going to raise up the Antichrist. His name's the Assyrian. Then Isaiah 8:8 talks about, Emmanuel, spoken about in chapter 7. This is chapter 8 now. I'm going to send the Assyrian Antichrist at the end of time against your land. He's going to sweep through and overflow your land like a river. That's Alan Brooks' version, paraphrased of the Bible. And then he's going to rule. He doesn't say that here in Isaiah 8, but he's going to rule for 3.5 years because we know he will. It says that like 4 times in Daniel. It says it in Revelation 3 or 4 times. He's going to rule for times, and half a time, Daniel says, or 3.5 years. And after he does that, what's going to happen? Remember, I just told you what's going to happen in Matthew. It says, after the tribulation, the sun, moon, and stars are darkened, which means what? It means it's dark, people. And at the end of Isaiah 8, verse 21, it says, the evil people on the earth will look at the ground and they'll see nothing but darkness and distress. That code word, this is the time of great distress. And they'll see darkness and gloom. And then Isaiah 9 picks up the story. It says, the people who are walking in gloom and darkness will see a great light. A man from Galilee, that's Jesus Christ. He's going to come back. He's going to destroy the Antichrist. There's going to be a picture of Armageddon in Isaiah where it talks about the boots and the weapons of war are burned. That matches Ezekiel 39. And then it says, from that time forward, the government will be upon his shoulders. As unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. So you can see how this is a picture of the last times. It starts out with an invasion, Isaiah 7:20 and Isaiah 8:8. And then at the end of that invasion, after 3.5 years, the Antichrist everything's dark because the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. And then Jesus Christ comes back and splits the darkness, and he sets up his kingdom where the government will be upon his shoulders from that time forward. That's exactly what's going to happen. And then what does Isaiah 10 say? It reiterates this whole scene. It talks about, at the end of time, this is the complaining God part. I'm really mad at you, my people, Israel, so I'm going to send this Assyrian to invade you. He's going to think he's going to do it because he's so great. He's the Islamic Messiah. He's going to think, I did all this because I'm this great, powerful person. But I'm sending him, and then when I'm through using him to get your tail in a crack, Israel, when I'm through using him, Isaiah 10 says, again, Alan Brooks' version of the Bible, I'm going to come against him. I'm going to destroy him. And then what does Isaiah 11 say? It talks about the millennium, where, Jesus Christ comes back as a banner there too. And there's peace on earth. It's wonderful times. It's a great party. It's a Christian party. So you can see how Isaiah 7 through 11 has one picture. It repeats this last 3.5 years. It starts with an invasion of Israel. It ends with Jesus Christ coming back in the darkness and Armageddon happening. And then from that time forward, the government will be upon his shoulders. Now you know the real meaning and the real context of that famous verse that we hear in Christmas songs all the time. The government will be upon his shoulders from that time forward, it says. And then the millennium will happen where everybody's at peace in Isaiah 11. And it also reiterates there that Jesus Christ came back like a banner. And wouldn't you know it, Isaiah 13 through 22 starts the process all over again. It talks about Isaiah 13, a northern army made up of Iran, the Medes, and other peoples from that area. They're going to sweep down and invade Babylon or Iraq. So the whore of Babylon is not America. It's not the Vatican. It is Babylon. It's Iraq and Saudi Arabia, because it says that. And then Isaiah, at the end of Isaiah 13, it talks about what? The sun, moon, and stars being darkened. We know that happens when Jesus Christ comes back. So you don't have to be rocket science to figure that out, right, people? And then Isaiah 14, the next chapter, talks about Lucifer and the Antichrist being sent to hell. Isaiah, talks about who the people say, who is this scrawny little weird character that ruled over the kingdoms of the world? Isaiah 14, Alan Brooks' version. Because I'm doing this all from memory right now, people, extemporaneously. Anyway, and then Isaiah 14:25 talks about the Antichrist, the Assyrian Antichrist I told you about in Isaiah 7:20 and 8:8. that guy, Jesus Christ, comes back and he says, I'm going to crush you on the mountains, on my mountains of my land. You know, a picture of the Apollo Creed version, I'm going to crush you. And it also says that same thing in Joel 2:20. It says, when Jesus Christ comes back, I'm going to drive out the northern army, their armies, and I'm going to drive them into the sea. Now, you see, people, this puts to rest any notion that God's going to protect Israel through all of this, and it's going to be some sort of European Antichrist who invades. No, no, no. It says he's an Assyrian, and Assyria is basically where Iran and these other Shia radical nations are right now. It says the same story throughout the entire Bible, which makes sense when you think about it, that this northern Shia invasion is going to sweep down and invade in Israel in peace. They're going to flee, and then Jesus Christ is going to come back with the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. It says that in Isaiah 19. The sun, moon, and stars are darkened. Jesus Christ comes to Egypt on a cloud. Just like Matthew 24. The sun, moon, and stars are darkened, and Jesus Christ comes back on a cloud. Same God, same Bible, same prophecies, same predictions, okay? So it's not hard to figure out. I mean, you know, God showed me by his grace because I'm just too stupid to look at all the commentaries. And then, you know, after Isaiah 21, after he invades, you know, Iraq and all these other countries in Isaiah 15 through 21, and his last stop is Saudi Arabia, the whore of Babylon, what does he do next? He invades Israel, Isaiah 22. And Israel gets invaded and thrashed. And then it says at the end of Isaiah 22, all throughout Isaiah 22, again, one of my protractors said, you know, Alan, Isaiah 22 is about the 2,500 years ago. And I said, well, really? How come at the end of Isaiah 22 it says, the son of Hilkiah will have the key of David on his shoulders, and he'll come back, and he'll be driven like a peg and firmly rule Israel in that day. You know, Guy, in that day is not 2,500 years ago. It's about the future. And Jesus Christ in the book of Revelation has the key of David on his shoulders. And he said, well, that's a type. A type of what? Really? That didn't happen 2,500 years ago. It will happen when Jesus Christ comes back, okay? So Isaiah 22 is Israel invaded, and then after Israel's invaded and thrashed, then Jesus Christ comes back as the key of David, or with the key of David on his shoulders. And then Isaiah 24, 25, 26, and 27 talk about what? The sun, moon are darkened. Jesus Christ comes back and lays waste to the earth, Isaiah 24. Then Isaiah 26 says, Isaiah 26:19 says, your dead will live. And that's the resurrection of the people, of the dead people. And then it says, go to your rooms and wait for the wrath of God to pass by, Isaiah 26:20. Then Isaiah 27 talks about a great trumpet will sound, and the Lord will gather the Israelites one by one from all over the world. That's just like the rapture in Matthew 24. A great trumpet sounds, and the Lord will gather the Christians one by one from all over the world. And so you can see how God showed me something special, that over several chapters, there's a story, a secret story, that the experts miss, because experts, God bless their hearts, tend to look at stuff with microscopes. They tend to look at the Greek, the Hebrew, you know, the Latin variants, you know, all the grammar of this one word or this one sentence, and then they proclaim, aha, Israel, this means Israel, this happened to Israel 2,500 years ago. But behind all that, there's all these words that say in that day, in the day of the Lord, at the end of time, the latter days. It says that all throughout all these chapters. And then it says Jesus Christ, the sun, moon, and stars will be darkened, and Jesus Christ will come back. So that is the sequence of events that's all throughout the Bible. We see this also in Ezekiel 7 through 11. The worst of the Gentile nations comes in and invades a peaceful Israel. Israel flees to the mountains. He defiles the temple. Isaiah, and then Ezekiel 8 says that this Antichrist will set up an idol or an image of the beast in the temple. And he called it abomination. And then those people in that temple pray to Mecca. Then Ezekiel 9, the next chapter, talks about the Jews being marked on the foreheads, which matches Revelation 7, the 144,000 Jews are marked on their foreheads. Then Ezekiel 10 and 11 talks about the glory of God, which is Jesus Christ, leaving heaven and coming back and standing on a mountain east of Jerusalem, which is Jesus Christ coming back. It cannot be argued. That is the sequence of events, and it's right there hidden away in Ezekiel 7 through 11. We see that all throughout Ezekiel, all throughout Isaiah, all throughout Jeremiah. It says the same sequence of events. Jeremiah 4. During a false peace, how you've deceived these people with peace, Jeremiah 3 and 4. Then an army from the north will come down, being aided by watchers or perhaps fallen angels. They're going to come down and thrash Israel. And then it says, of the heavens there'll be no light, Jeremiah 4. It says there'll be a great earthquake, which matches the end of Revelation 6. A great earthquake happens, the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. And then it talks about, God coming back and setting up his kingdom at the end of Jeremiah 4. So the point is, people, that the Bible has the same story hidden away in secret stories in consecutive chapters in the Old Testament that I don't think anybody's seen before. And God showed me, a dumb hillbilly, originally from Texas, he showed me all these things. And I think it's worth taking a look at. And doesn't it make sense that the same God would use the same words and phrases throughout the same Bible to describe the same sequence of events? And that is, at the end of time, there's going to be a false peace. Israel's going to be invaded by an Islamic Antichrist. They're going to flee to the mountains or possibly flee to America, as Revelation 12:14 says, in an airlift. They're going to be trampled for 42 months, as Revelation 11:2 says. And then after that time of trampling, immediately, Jesus said in Matthew 24, the sun, moon, and stars are darkened, a trumpet sounds, he comes back in the sky and gathers the elect in a rapture. Now, if there's another one 7 years before, let's go, I'm ready. But that's the sequence of events, and then after that, we know, according to the Old Testament, that there's going to be the millennium where all the peace starts, right? We see that over and over in the book of Isaiah, that same sequence of events. And we see it there too. We see it in the book of Revelation. Revelation 6. This is the last example, and then I'm going to sign off. The Antichrist does what? Then the white horse, he takes peace. Then he causes famine and death, the black and pale horses. The red horse takes peace. You can see the picture. Antichrist takes peace, just like we've been looking at. And then he causes death. He kills the saints. The saints are under the altar in Revelation 6 saying, God, when are you going to stop all this madness? When are you going to stop this Antichrist from killing everybody? And God says, you're going to have to wait until this last time is over and be patient. Your number's not complete yet. And then after it's complete, after that tribulation, it says the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. A great earthquake happens. And we know what that is. That's Jesus Christ coming back. And it says at the end of Revelation 6, all the bad people are hiding, the kings of the earth are hiding after the sun, moon, and stars are darkened in the caves. They're hiding from the returning Jesus because it's the wrath of God starting to fall. Then Revelation 7, there's a rapture. There's a great multitude from all over the world is suddenly around the throne. Then Revelation 8 and 9, the wrath of God falls. So it's the same sequence of events as we just saw in Matthew 24. Matthew 24, Israel's invaded. Antichrist rules for 3.5 years. Sun, moon, and stars are darkened. A trumpet sounds, and a rapture happens. And he doesn't say it in Matthew 24, but we know the wrath of God falls. Revelation 6, Israel's invaded by the white horse riding Antichrist. He takes the peace. He kills the saints, just like Jesus said also in Matthew 24, you're going to be hated and killed by all nations. And then after the tribulation, it says in Revelation 6, the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. A great earthquake happens. And then Revelation 7, a rapture happens, where a great multitude is suddenly around the throne. It's the same picture throughout the entire Bible. In the Old Testament, it's hidden, though, because they don't always say in the Old Testament that there's this 3.5-year period, but because we know it's there, we have to add it in every time. And so it looks like in all these places in the Old Testament, Israel's invaded during a false peace. Instantly, God comes back. But we know that's not what happens. He comes back after the 3.5-year tribulation. If you add that in to all these places in the Old Testament that say, in that day, or the day of the Lord, you see the exact same sequence of events every single time. Now, isn't that Ray cool? This is Alan Brooks signing off for another New Discovery teaching series.